Back here on HQ, presented by Canva, we're going to get into starts and sits for Week 7. Kicking it off with Jamie's start of the week. It is none other than swag surfing, Waffle House loving, Kirk Cousins. Kirk came in clutch in fantasy in Week 5 against Tampa Bay at 42.4 fantasy points. A little bit of a different story Week 6 versus Carolina, but Jamie is feeling like Kirk is going to bounce back here in Week 7. Jamie, tell us why. It's a great matchup, Jacqueline. You're looking at a guy that didn't have to do the heavy lifting in Week 6 that he did in Week 5, and he might have to do that again in Week 7. The Seahawks offense will hopefully show up and make this a back-and-forth game. Vegas is telling us it's going to be a high-scoring affair. Over 50 points is the projected total. So we like that for Kirk Cousins. But we also like the fact that this is a really beat-up Seattle defense. They just put another safety on injured reserve. And the last 3 quarterbacks, Jared Goff, Daniel Jones without Malik Neighbors, and Brock Purdy, all over 26 fantasy points against the Seattle defense. So Cousins has potentially top 5 upside as Sportsline has him ranked and projected. I love the setup for him. I think it's going to be great for all of his main receiving options, which is Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and even Kyle Pitts. So all these guys should have an opportunity to play well. I still think Bijan Robinson can get his numbers, hopefully in the passing game also. So it's a big opportunity for Kirk Cousins to reestablish himself as he was in Week 5 as one of the upper echelon of fantasy quarterbacks. I think he gets back to that Week 7.
Jamie mentioned the safety going on IR. It's a big-time safety. It's Rayshawn Jenkins, so that's a huge loss to them. We don't know if Reek Woolen is going to play. That's one of their best outside cornerbacks. They are getting healthy on the D-line, but that might hurt their run game. That might force them to throw even more, and we've seen it. In the games where they've had 50-plus points, them and their opponent, we've seen Kirk Cousins throw 35 times. 30 times last week, and then who could forget about the 58-point game? And Cousins was this close to having 21 fantasy points last week. Darnell Mooney had a pass in the end zone. Go right off his hands. If he catches that football, it's 21 points for Cousins. No one is blinking at it, and you probably don't have Cousins as a start of the week in that case because he's too obvious. But now it's not so obvious. You should start Kirk Cousins. I like him more than he does. Okay, wow. All right, let's get to some of your other starts. Jamie, you do have Sam Darnold on there, who is coming off of a bye, but he's facing a pretty tough Lions defense. It's a really good Lions defense, but they're missing their best defender and really the NFL's best defender for this season, Dane Hutchinson, who's out for the year. So Darnold, last time we saw him against his former team, the Jets, in London. So you know what? Doesn't really count because it was in a different country. So in his last 3 games in America, over 20 fantasy points. We're just going to wipe that one. It doesn't count. It only counts when it's good. But his last 3 games prior to that, he was over 20 fantasy points. Then he's back on track in this matchup against Detroit in another game that's expected to be a high-scoring affair. Juju Smith-Schuster, a lot of fantasy managers might not want to start him. And as a matter of fact, he's still available in about 40% of leagues on CBS Sports.com. Wow. I'm a little surprised because what we saw the last time he played in New Orleans, against New Orleans in Week 5, he had over 100. He had 130 yards receiving. We know no Rashee Rice. This is really the guy that I think we'll see Patrick Mahomes continue to rely on with Travis Kelce at this point. And so Juju's in a really good spot against a team that they're going to struggle to run against. And I think we'll see Mahomes have to throw. Now, I don't love Mahomes because his just fantasy numbers get capped because they don't really score a lot of touchdowns. But I think Juju does have an opportunity here to be over 100 yards receiving. So he should be a number 2 receiver this week. All right, Dave, let's get to your starts because you have Tank Bigsby on there. And this is somebody that I picked up on waivers like 2 weeks ago. And I left him on the bench, of course, in versus Indy. And he went off. He had like double-digit fantasy points. Then I put him in the lineup. You know, prisoner of the moment like behavior. Yeah. And he put up 2.4 fantasy points for me in half PPR. But he is a start for you in Week 7 versus New England. It's assuming that ETN is out. But even if ETN plays, I do think Bigsby can still be the rushing downs guy for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And what a matchup going up against the New England Patriots. I wrote it down. 4.9, 5.2, 7.4 yards per rush to opposing running backs in their past 3 games. 2 of those games, our lead back had at least 20 non-PPR fantasy points. And then the third team was the Dolphins. 2 backs combined for 17 non-PPR points, and a fullback scored a touchdown. They cannot stop anybody on the ground. And I think the Jaguars have to do something a little bit different. This is what they did in their win. They leaned on the ground game, and you saw Bigsby have a good game. So I like him this week. I think he's a top 24 fantasy
Where will you have him ranked if ETN plays?
He's probably going to be more in that flex range if ETN plays because we know that ETN will get some carries. But we saw last week, the reason why Bigsby didn't play a lot, they fell behind. Dearness Johnson was their passing downs guy, their hurry-up offense guy, and Bigsby, I think he had 1 snap in the 4th quarter. So just no bueno, and I don't think this is going to be that type of game for Jacksonville where they trail to the Patriots. Who are the Patriots building a lead on? Nobody, not even Jacksonville.
It's a different Patriots team, though. It is a different Patriots team.
I thought Drake May played very nicely in the 4th quarter last week. I'll give him credit for that. Now, we can talk about Juwan Johnson as a streaming fantasy tight end. I like him because who's left to catch passes for the New Orleans Saints in this offense? last week, and this is with Rashid Shaheed healthy and playing, Juwan Johnson was second on the team in routes run. So that's important to see. Now he could be number one. And I expect the targets to go up. Denver's allowed some numbers to tight ends recently. Brock Bowers had a dominant game, caught a pass, ran for a touchdown. I don't know if Juwan Johnson can do what Brock Bowers did, but I think he can be a good fill-in as a bye-week replacement. And then the other three starts on this list, they're in the same game as Kirk Cousins. High-scoring game. Let's take advantage of it. Start them all.
All right, so Dave, those are your starts. Let's go to your sits. And, heading into week 7, all of our heads are spinning because we're trying to get used to Davante Adams in a Jets uniform. Now we're trying to get used to Amari Cooper, going to be in Buffalo. But Amari Cooper is on your sits list.
And he's in a different situation than Davante Adams because he's going to be working with a quarterback he's never caught passes from in an offense that's new to him. And by the way, he's taking on the Titans. And the Titans have one of the best outside corners in L'Jarius Sneed. So I'm pretty sure might be hurt. If he's out, then that'll help his case. But it's still going to be an issue of timing. How much does he know of this offense? How much is he going to play? How much will Ray Davis take over everything if he's the lead running back in that offense? And then maybe they don't throw nearly as much against Tennessee. So I'm a little nervous to put Amari Cooper as a must-start in fantasy lineups. It'll change if L'Jarius Sneed is out. But if L'Jarius Sneed plays for sure, then Cooper's more of a flex.
Fun note about Amari Cooper. He's been traded a lot of times in his career.
Yeah.
Last time he was traded in midseason, went to Dallas. 5 catches, 58 yards, and a touchdown in his first game. So he's used to walking into a new situation and not necessarily knowing everything. But there is a much better quality of target from Josh Allen coming to Amari Cooper than there has been from Deshaun Watson going to Amari Cooper. So 8.8 targets per game was what he was averaging in Cleveland. If he's getting 8.8 targets per game in Buffalo, we could be looking at a top 10 wide receiver.
Absolutely could see that happening. And a third of those targets in Cleveland, uncatchable. So, how are you supposed to put up good numbers when literally a third of the throws that you're getting, you cannot catch them. They're not good enough to be caught. You can't do anything with them. He had some drops too. I think he'll just be a lot more comfortable in Buffalo.
I would like to see his first game not Sneed on the other side.
Exactly.
If Sneed is there, it does make it tough to trust, but he's dealing with a quad injury, so maybe no L'Jarius Sneed. That'd be great for Amari Cooper.
There's another sit that we got to talk about, and it's Kyler Murray, because normally he's like a must-start fantasy quarterback.
Is he?
I don't know if he is anymore,
Yeah.
Jamie. 2 big games this year. Every other game he's had 4 of them, under 17 fantasy points. This is a Chargers defense. Say what you will about Mahomes. They held him to under 20 fantasy points. Fields barely had 20 fantasy points against them. He did a ton of rushing. Bo Nix had a good game against them last week. I don't know if that's something that's going to be copied by Kyler Murray in this game. And I like a lot of other quarterbacks this week. Cousins, Baker, Darnold, Geno, Goff. All of them better than Kyler Murray.
You're forgetting the biggest thing. Marvin Harrison Jr. may not play. And so you're looking at, may not have his best wide receiver here who's got a concussion. We're going to find out today. James Conner may not play also. He's dealing with an ankle injury. That's a big one to keep an eye on there. So we could be looking at 2 Cardinals players that are big pieces of what Kyler Murray does. And the nice thing about the Chargers, you mentioned what they've done against quarterbacks. They don't give up points. They've allowed 20 points or less to every team that they've faced. So you're not getting the big scoring opportunities here from the Cardinals. You're not getting that from Kyler Murray. It's tough to trust him. He was one of my favorite players coming into the season. At this point, I'm looking for other options to replace him in my lineup.
That's what I'm going to be doing because I have Marvin Harrison Jr. and James Conner. So if you saw me dying inside as you were finishing up your answer, that was why, because I was just processing that.
Sorry to laugh at that. I shouldn't.
No, it's okay. It's tough out here. It's also tough out here if you have Dalton Kincaid on your roster, which I do. He's on your sits, and it's not easy to go get a tight end in this fantasy football climate, Jamie. So what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, this isn't one of those necessarily you have to completely sit him, but if you can find somebody else and carry 2 tight ends, like Hunter Henry, I like better this week than I do Dalton Kincaid. He's facing a Titans defense. Now, it's a little skewed because the tight ends that they've played against have had some quarterback issues. Cole Kmet just had a big game with Caleb Williams' first start. Tucker Kraft at that point was with Malik Willis. Jonnu Smith, who was coming off a good game last week, for example, or last game, for example, was dealing with Tyler Huntley. So they faced some tight ends with some bad quarterbacks. But they are statistically number 1 in terms of fewest fantasy points allowed to the position. Kincaid has had some good games, but really for the most part has been very underwhelming. And go back to what Dave said about Amari Cooper now joining the team. Now you have another mouth to feed. It's not like Josh Allen's been throwing the ball out. We're not seeing 35, 40 plus attempts. It's been very controlled and not necessarily a huge volume offense. So a lower volume for the tight end. Dawson Knox, for example, scores a touchdown last week. Bad matchup. Dealing with an injury also. He's got a collarbone issue. So he's just inside my top 12, but barely. He's the number 12 tight end.
Yeah, we looked at the tight end rankings there, and Trey McBride, who is at number 1, hasn't even been outstanding himself. It's been tough.
No,
for
but he's the benefactor of Marvin Harrison not playing.
There's a lot of tight ends starting to play better.
Okay.
Kelsey's playing better. McBride's playing better. Bauer's in a much better situation. He was already playing very well. So you're looking at those guys at the top. Hopefully Laporta joins them. Pitts actually can make it 3 games in a row with double digits in PPR points. That would be great if he can get going as well, because we know what his upside is. So there's a lot of tight ends that are starting to look a little bit better, but Dalton Kincaid will be one that I like to see a little bit more.
I hope it stays that way. But Patrick Mahomes, another guy that is on your sits list.
This is the difference between fantasy and reality. He might be the MVP of the league.
Yeah.
He's having a fantastic season. Chiefs are undefeated. But he
His
doesn't
stats
score
stink.
points.
Yeah.
He's got 1 game over 20 fantasy points so far this season, and it was barely. Now, he should have had 2. If Juju catches the ball in the end zone against the Saints, then we are getting a 20-point game, a 21-point game for him. But that's what we're talking about. 20, 21 points. This guy used to be 30, 31 points. I mean, it's just not fun to watch him as a fantasy quarterback. Now, they'll be close. He'll go win the game in the 4th quarter. Might be a penalty or so that helps him along the way, just saying. But the way that Mahomes is playing from a fantasy perspective, I would start Drake May over Patrick Mahomes this week.
That's wild.
One guy is facing the Jaguars. They bleed fantasy points. One guy is facing the 49ers. You know they're pissed after what happened in the Super Bowl. So Mahomes, right now, Drake May's got a better game on his resume in 1 start.
You know, I grew up 45 minutes south of Jacksonville,
in 1
man.
start.
Come on. Cut me some slack.
You don't live there now?
I don't.
Now you live close to the Dolphins. That's even worse.
It's even worse. It's still my team, Jamie. It's still my team. I'm hoping the Jags pull out a win just because.
Listen, I start Trevor Lawrence over Mahomes too.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, woof. All right. Jamie, Dave, we certainly appreciate it. I will connect with you guys later because I have more questions. My lineup is down so incredibly bad. You can hear the guys on Fantasy Football Today. Download, follow, listen wherever you get your pods, or you can scan that QR code on your screen.